Welcome to another Sober on a Drunk Planet podcast episode. My guest this week is Leo. Leo is a DJ. He's got lots going on in his sobriety. He's had previous stints of sobriety as well. So keen to sort of dig deep into why he started drinking again and sort of why he thinks it's different this time, just to give us a bit of a different take on it, but also just to get his background, what led him to the drinking, and if applicable, drugs. I never like to assume a DJ's done drugs, but we'll get onto it in a minute anyway.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm all good, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm looking forward to this. I did DJing terribly when I was younger. I love music. I still love music, but I think a big part of my drug addiction and alcohol addiction is that I find it a bit too traumatic still to go back to clubs and pubs and go back to Ibiza. So it'd be good to see how you navigate all the festivals and stuff that you now do sober, presumably.
Yeah, 100%. That's funny you say about DJing, because I used to DJ drunk and it wasn't very good at all. But you thought you were. You sort of be like, oh, it's almost like you'd make a mistake, and because you're drunk, you'd care less about it, and you'd be like, oh, they haven't noticed. Which, to be fair, they probably didn't, because they were all drunk themselves.
To be fair, I was so bad. I was always the person that started at 9 o'clock. I've always remembered the first residency up in Nottingham. I went to pass over to the DJ that was on at 10, and I took the needle off the vinyl. So everyone's suddenly in the club and they're like, okay, brilliant. Nice.
Yeah.
I then just drank all the free drinks they gave me and I fucked off to another club, I think.
No, I mean, yeah, that's it. That's unfortunately, it's one of those jobs where it's totally okay to drink whilst DJing, and they encourage it, give you a rider, give you shots, and I remember my fiance. She often talks to me about a time once when I was DJing in Bournemouth, and they had basically a camera coming down onto the decks, and it was like about 2 a.m. And I was sort of, you could only see my hands. I basically just sat down on the floor because I was that drunk. And I still went. To be fair, I actually, a few people have said it's quite a talent, because, I'd often at some of my residencies drink 10 pints and DJ. And just, I think where it becomes like second nature. And obviously I always set a very high standard for myself. I'm my own biggest critic. So to Joe Public, maybe they'd be like, yeah, this guy's all right. But in my head the next morning, from what I could remember, I'd be just, cringing, beating myself up. And that's if I didn't, that's if I didn't leave something in a cab on the way home. When it was records, you could maybe leave a record in a cab and it wouldn't be a bit so bad. But when, you started forking out like $2,000 for a mixer and leave that in a cab, I've never done that. But I have left all sorts of stuff lying around, and I was actually known for it. So this is definitely better sober.
So let's just go back from the beginning, just sort of give us an idea of where you're from, your sort of upbringing, whether there was anything traumatic that you're happy to talk about. It sounds like the wrong phrase, but able to talk about and share. And then I guess just your understanding of how your alcohol manifested to the point where you then decided to go sober.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a kind of normal upbringing. Both my parents are heavy drinkers, and they still are now. And I think it's often people of our era, their parents, but lots of parents drunk. And I kind of think from a young age I was around heavy drinking, so subconsciously I probably got a lot of that and took a lot of that in. For me, I didn't really start drinking until 17. So before music there was skateboarding, and then for years I was juggling the two. But around from 14 to 17 I was like showing promise of becoming like a very good skateboarder. I used to be sponsored and things like that, and skating contests. But a friend of mine who was a rugby player, after we were skating, he was also skating, and he just said, "Do you want to come out and have some beers?" And we went out, and I got really drunk and managed to pull a girl. And I was just like, "Oh, this is excellent. Do you do this every weekend?" He's like, "Yeah." So I was like, "Okay, cool." And then that was it. It was just like, but I think it was up until then you could skate with a hangover, and it was all good. And then obviously as you get older, just you can't really do much of the hangover.
No,
but so that was when I kind of started to get into drinking at that age. But I certainly think there are things that happened in my life that led me towards drinking too much. When I got older, there was times at home. Well, my mum, she got cancer when I was like 14, and was quite ill with that. And at the same sort of time, my brother had issues, as in he was kind of suffering from mental health. So I was kind of felt slightly secluded, and sort of, I think for me, drinking to excess was more about attention, because I'm one of those drunks who do a lot of stupid stuff, almost like attention seeking. I think I mentioned when I wrote to you, emailed you, I was traveling in Australia and I streaked a football game and stuff like that, thankfully before smartphones. But I just very much do that, and that was also kind of accepted in the whole skateboarding sort of crazy wacky era that I grew up skating. Now it's a little bit more straight edged and professional, but back then it was just a bit more punk rock, and skaters just tended to get smashed and do stupid things. So it all kind of slotted in together. But I think it was due to what happened, certainly at home, and being around alcohol, and sort of being able to see that it was being used as a coping mechanism, possibly, that I thought that was okay. And then obviously when I did drink, I would exasperate my behavior to a point where it caused problems. I've done a lot of stupid things that a lot of people thought was funny, and it could, I used to do loads of stuff like smashing pint glasses over my head, and like really kind of stupid things, to be fair.
Bit like Jackass then, a bit of a Steve-O.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, all the guys from Dirty Sanchez used to come down to Newquay and sort of skate at our local park. And we used to take them to the sand dunes, and they used to like do loads of crazy jumps off the sand. They're always mad, those guys. But yeah, so it's very, very similar to that. But obviously, I think my friends have always put up with it, and some thought it was funny. Girlfriends have always hated it. So it's always been a bit of a problem in relationships. And I just think as you grow older, we get a bit more mature, and obviously when things like anxiety start to kick in, and you start thinking, "Oh God, what did I do last night?" And obviously, thankfully I've stopped doing all those things now. Smartphones are out, because I just look like a lunatic on social media.
I think at least that's a good accountability measure to not drink, I guess.
Yeah. So it was, I wasn't alone. Lots of other people were doing it as well, especially because we grew up in Cornwall. So now it's very different in Cornwall, but back in the day it was kind of we had one Burger King, and that was about it. It was quite it's quite backward in a way. So a lot of kids down there, they looked for things like drinks and drugs to find for their own amusement. There was always sort of like illegal raves going on at places, and people getting drunk down the beach and stuff like that. So it certainly was an environment where a lot of excessive behaviour was happening. But I look back on it fondly, but probably not the excessive drinking.
What point was it? I guess, was it always you just had too many from day one?
I couldn't stop, and I still can't. So like I can appear quite drunk after 3 beers, a lot more chatty and joking and things like that. But I could literally drink all night. Like I haven't got a stop button, which is just problematic. It's not good for you when you think about what you're pouring down your neck, and obviously you lack of sleep, and just it gets to a point where you're just not coherent, and it's just pointless.
Did you have blackouts as well?
Yeah, 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 and that's usually where the main kind of anxiety would come from. The next day, you'd sort of just be, I'd wake up, and if you didn't remember something, I'd just be like really worried that I'd said something to my other half, or done something to piss someone off, and you'd be checking your phone and things like that if your phone was still in your pocket, all those kind of things.
I think from a male perspective, it's blackouts happen, but I think they're so normalised. It's not something that we would generally say outright. But with hindsight, they're just as dangerous for men as they are for females. We do lots of stupid shit. And like you said, the amount of times I've woken up the next day with a horrible dry mouth, possibly vomit somewhere, or the kebab halfway up the house or something.
Yeah.
And then just getting messages the next day saying, "Oh, you were really funny last night," and I'm like, "That's not good."
Yeah, that's
not
it.
good.
I used to get that as soon as you had like or someone would say, "Do you remember what you did last night?" And I'd just be like, "Oh no." Like, what do I do? Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I don't know, that I just lived so long doing that every weekend. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's every weekend. Some weekends it'd be tamer than others. But I went from Cornwall. I went to university in Brighton. Well, obviously, university is just madness anyway. I certainly wasn't alone during that, but then I moved to London, and as you know, it's just like non-stop. There's always a party happening.
Cornwall, Brighton, and London. Wow.
Yeah,
that is some mix of party venues, isn't it?
Yeah, and Sydney before London. I lived in Sydney for 6 months and then travelled around a bit. So yeah, it's lots going on.
It's funny, Sydney. I lived there for a bit just before I decided to go to rehab. But it was so expensive. It was like £8 a pint, $300 for a gram of coke if you could find any.
Yeah, it's hard to get.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was a complete drug fiend by that point, so I'd quite happily travel anywhere and everywhere to find it. But it is funny, like your problems don't magically disappear. I'm guessing you did all the same stuff in Australia that you were doing in Brighton, London, and Cornwall.
Yeah, totally. And I think it was in London when I first started thinking like, this is maybe problematic, and I'd start doing things like taking time out, like doing a dry January to try and prove to myself. I think when I was skateboarding, especially as in my later years of skating, I just knew that it was no hope of skating on a hangover. So that was quite good. That was almost like, it prevent me from going out partying and stuff. And I remember, in fact, in Brighton when sorry, just getting WhatsApped. When like I was seeing a girl at the time, she was trying to get me to go out drinking, and I was like, no, because I want to go and film some skating tomorrow. And she was getting all angry because I wouldn't drink with her. But yeah, it's sorry, I'm just turning off WhatsApp so it doesn't. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's ringing in my ear. So yeah, and then in London, I just remember because I wasn't skating because I kind of hurt my wrist really bad, and at the time in London, I started on this pirate radio show called Itch FM, which brought a lot of other DJ opportunities and things like that. So I didn't have the skating to kind of veer me off and away from drinking, and that was when I just because I was going out to a lot more clubs and things like that, and it was UK hip hop that I was sort of specialising in at the time, and as a Cornish white guy in London, like you don't really want to be getting staggering around these clubs and acting like the big I am. So I had a few close scrapes, just purely because I was just being a knob, probably couldn't walk in a straight line, and was bumping into people, and people would take offense to it and things like that. So I had friends sort of have words with me then, and it's just started to dawn on me that what was happening was getting maybe out of control. So it was around then, I think, and that was when, like 2005, 6, I just started realizing that maybe there were sort of issues, and just trying to look deeper, because before it was just like one big party, everyone else around me was partying, and I didn't really think I was worse than anyone else. But I guess as I started getting older and people started getting careers and becoming a bit more, serious about their jobs, it's then I just sort of started to realise that I seem to be dealing with it a lot worse than other people.
Yeah, I think that's an important part, isn't it? I think genetically we're all different, but everyone's environments and everything else, their upbringings are all different. You might be in similar groups of friends, but not everyone has addictive genetics. So you might be more predisposed to the dopamine hits and wanting it again and again and again, whereas someone else doesn't have that drive and motivation to keep getting that same hit. And I think that's important for people to understand, because it's not just you thinking that you're different. There are physical elements as well as the mental health and all that, and the environments you're in, the industry you're in as well, probably, I'd imagine, is booze and drug heavy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, I always seem to be the drunker DJ out of people. I had like a group of friends who are DJs, and maybe they'd drink, more or as much as me. But I was in sort of, DJing for different MCs and things like that, and they'd never drink. They just wouldn't. Whereas I'd always be like, okay, sick, I get the whole rider then. They were very much more kind of focused on their craft and stuff. And I mean, just to add as well, like, at one point I was DJing full time in London, but I've always had a career alongside it as well. So maybe that was part of it as well. Like, DJing for me was never like my bread and butter. So maybe I didn't take it as seriously, or just saw it as a party. Whereas now, I'm a lot more professional about it all. But yeah, it's always around, and especially I think you get promoters as well who are kind of probably dabbling in that kind of thing. So they'd always be, sort of offering you drugs and stuff. And obviously these days it's a no, but back in the day it'd just be like a ball to a red flag. It's just like...
Yeah. So just going to get up to the point when you had 14 months of sobriety. When was that?
So that was in March 2019. I just decided enough was enough, and that was just post a heavy session and a quarrel I had with a taxi driver, and me falling down my stairs, and like I just
quite a few things to
set
the wheels in motion.
And I think the next day I was tiling our kitchen, and it was a horrible, thankless task. If you've ever cut tiles on the
hangover as well.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. I think it must have been punishment from my other half, like, for the night before. And it just took me all day, and I was just covered in all this kind of clay and spray from cutting all the tiles. And I just sort of said to myself then, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And before I'd taken like a month, 2 months, I think especially my partner I've been with now for 14 years, she was always very much like, she'd like me to be able to come out and have a few drinks and drink how she drinks, because she's, she can have 8 drinks and then stop. Whereas, that's a very different picture for me. 8 drinks and I'm off to the races. 2.
Yeah, me as well.
So yeah, and that was in 2019 in March. And then I just got really into, I was also quite fat at the time. I'd sort of put on, I think I was like 14.5 stone. So not quite, but I was out of shape. Yeah. And I did a shame picture in front of the mirror. And I was just like, yeah, I've got to sort this out. And I'd always gone to the gym probably for a couple of years previous to that, but never followed a program or never taken it serious. And yeah, from that point in March, I just totally focused everything on fitness and losing. I lost 2.5 stone, and followed a program, and was fasting, just eating healthy. It was the first time I just actually concentrated on the right things to eat, and just did intermittent fasting, and just generally just living a lot better. And yeah, so that went on for 14 months. So obviously in that time I did, you know, festivals. At this big festival I play at called Shindig, the guys who run it, I used to be signed on their label and work for them on their label, and then they started a festival. So it's like, it's a great kind of place for me and other friends who sort of play similar kind of music, and sort of other DJ mates to all get together. So that festival was always just a massive blowout where you just meet all your mates and just get hammered. But yeah, obviously I did that sober, which was, it was hard at first, but because everyone I was with were just on it. But I was, yeah, I stuck it out, and it ended up having a really nice time. You just got to kind of, you know, wipe a lot of spit off your face at the end of the night from
people repeating themselves as well.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, went on holiday. We've got a camper van, so we always go drive around France in the summer.
Oh,
So, you know, we did that. And obviously for me, it was always sitting around drinking wine with my other half and cooking barbecues and stuff. So, but it's fine. I think once you can train your head and get yourself, I think it's the key point to get past for me is past like the 3-month, 4-month line, because that's where I fall off a lot of the time. But once you're past that, I think things become a little bit easier.
Why the 3-month, 4-month? What's so difficult?
I don't know. It just seems to me that that's in the past, because I did the 14 months and then I've tried to quit again. But I always get pulled into the drinking circle, the drinking friends. You know, I am the only non-drinker really in my group of friends. So it's, and everyone, you know, like we go into a friend's house on a Friday night and stay there till 2 a.m, dancing to music, drinking and all the rest of it. So yeah, just having to navigate that sober. It's just like we were talking about before, it's just easier to just give in sometimes and just drink. And but the next morning it's like, okay, that wasn't the easy option at all. It was the wrong one.
It's funny listening to everything you've said. You've been through this process enough times that I think you know deep down that you're not a good drinker.
No.
I think that pattern of behaviour is you've just mentioned it 5-6 times. But then I guess the thing I know from experience and speaking to lots of other people is that sometimes if you want a different life that is healthier and happier for yourself, then friendships do start to change, because I think friends won't change their habits, and it's not for us to try and change them. But then equally, you've got to put in place your own boundaries in terms of what makes you feel comfortable. So when you say that it's your friendship group that sort of gets you that 3 and 4 month stage, maybe with experience you'll be able to say no, or just have better exit plans. Yeah,
well, certainly this time. I mean, so this is probably number 5, probably the 5th time that I've sort of taken an abstinence from alcohol. And it's funny because so this time round, the reason I stopped drinking was I was suffering from anxiety, insomnia, and I think what I've done over the past, because I've invested so much in not drinking and being sober, it's almost like, and I think I said this to you in your email, it's like I've stained my subconscious with quit lit, like all the things that I've learned. And that, so if I do drink, it's like Armageddon in my head, you know, good being the sobriety, bad being alcohol, and the battleground is my brain. You know, it's like they're just going mad. So it's like, yeah, if I drink now, I don't sleep, I'm anxious. You know, you've got one shot at life, and I'm not going to put up with that, especially when I know that I've done it before and it was fine. The only reason I really started drinking again was because of COVID and being sort of locked indoors. And yeah, my other half just said, you know, why don't you just see if you can drink.
How did that go?
I mean, it went fine at first. You know, I think I had 2 glasses of wine. Again, I had this massive guilt like, what am I doing? What have I done? Like, you know, just, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because you get that I Am Sober app, and like, you know, you get so proud of those things that come up, like, you know, 70 days, year. And I felt awful for doing it, but again, I think I felt this longing for being accepted again into the friendship groups that, you know, go out and drink. And, you know, I think over time, a part of you almost forgets all the reasons why you stopped and stuff.
It feels comfortable. I think from my personal experience, that was the biggest thing that I had to change. 2.5 years sober was friendship group that was making me feel uncomfortable. Not because they're bad people, but because I couldn't be around them because they reminded me too much of alcohol and drugs. And that is something that through experience, you come to a natural decision on whether your sobriety is more important than saying yes for 2 or 3 hours, which could potentially turn into 2 days.
Yeah, well, I think what I've kind of taken on this time is, for me, it's going to be way better to deal and to learn to be around people who are drinking, and learn to just be okay, and, like, you know, have an exit strategy, not, you know, just accept I'm not going to be there until 2 a.m. If my other half wants to be there till 2 a.m, then I'll drive home and go back out and pick her up at another time. I recently did that at a nightclub. You know, just I just think that's just the best option now. I think it's easier than having to deal with all the head karate that, you know, I was confronted with over kind of Christmas and January this year, because I gave up, when was it, October, November, and then my plan was December and New Year I would have a few drinks and see how I got on. And that was, you know, when I actually really just started just not being able to sleep. It was just crazy. I was on Zopiclone, and, like, you know, I had to take tablets to get me to sleep, and for what? Because of alcohol. It's crazy.
So was it 72 days? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, we could tell you. Well, no, yeah, it's about that. I was going to get the app out.
Has the insomnia stopped?
Oh yeah, like you wouldn't believe. To the point where my other half gets angry because I just fall asleep on the sofa all the time. Like,
that's the dream. That is the dream right there.
I know. I'm catching flies at like 10 p.m. But I've recently, I don't know what it was, but I've got like sciatica, and they put me on amitriptyline, which also like help making you feel pretty drowsy. So I take those before I go to bed, and that's just been knocking me out even earlier. So, which doesn't help, obviously, if you have to go and do a DJ gig somewhere at 1 a.m. But I think you almost train your brain. You just know you've got something to do, so you just, you know, have a couple of espressos, you know, pre-workout or whatever, and then just go and crack on.
So in terms of I guess you've got festivals coming up over summer and DJing. Do you still DJ in clubs as well?
Yeah, I'm DJ. I've got a club gig where I've recently had one. I've got another one 31st of this month. One of the cool things about Bournemouth is, you know, you can do a few outdoor gigs on the beach and things like that. So, you know, that's always, I think the problem is as well with DJing, something I haven't touched on just yet, is it's quite nerve-wracking, you know, when you step up and you go on and sort of, you know, my style of DJing is kind of, you know, I'm a scratch DJ first and foremost, hip hop. These days are more, you know, I'll play a bit of everything, but I always do scratching and sort of, you know, live remixes and things like that. So there's a lot of room for screwing up. And you sometimes, what I used to, you know, just have a few beers as like Dutch courage, but, you know, Dutch courage would then just get out of hand. You know, like at a festival, let's say, you'd have a few beers, everyone starts drinking at 2 in the afternoon, like, or midday at a festival, and if you've got to be on stage at 10, like, just sitting there and just, like, you know, trying to drink sensibly until that time when you've got a problem with booze, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
but yeah, so I mean, still do clubs, and obviously down the beach, DJing down the beach, and in bars. Most of the places I play at will be around alcohol, but it doesn't affect me too much. I very much go in with a frame of mind as I've got a job to do. I get away from the kind of crowd as much as I can and just concentrate on what I've got to do. Some places it's always quite difficult because you've got people coming up and trying to buy you drinks, and it's very sweet of them and they're being nice because they're just enjoying what you're doing. But I always take some non-alcohol beers in a cool bag just in case the venue hasn't got them. But these days, I mean, I'm a lot better anyway. I just drink fizzy water. It looks like a gin and tonic or vodka tonic or whatever, and just people don't really question it that much. So yeah, it's one thing I've not had too much problems with as far as being in bars and clubs. I think because essentially you're there and everyone else is there, you're kind of out of it a little bit. So if you can just tune your head into that mind space of I'm here to work. I don't know if there's that many sober bartenders, but I guess a lot of places you can't drink while you work. A lot of places you can.
I was a bartender and I was pretty much drunk and high for most of my bartending career. I always assume people become bartenders to drink and have lock-ins and have late nights. I would be amazed if someone could actually do that job sober.
I mean, yeah, it would be hard because that's it. Obviously, you've got to do. It's a lot of interaction, isn't it, with drunk people? Which I get from time to time. Things have changed over the years for DJing, so I get numerous silly requests. I've actually got a tattoo that says no requests. But there's I remember someone came up and asked me for Peter Andre, Mysterious Girl. And I said, like, what part of my set makes you think that I've got that?
Did you scratch it in?
Well, I could have done a bit of a mashup, couldn't I? But I think, and certainly one thing that I've learned this time round, like I always used to be quite moody, and everyone always used to say I was a bit of a moody DJ, which is bizarre because I'm not a moody person. But I think it's because of silly requests. If someone comes up to the DJ booth, I'm just instantly thinking, oh, for God's sake, what's going on? But this time round, I've not drinking. I've taken a completely different approach to it, and sort of sometimes if they ask me something, I might try and find it and try and mix it in, just almost in my head, just look at it as a mission, like, okay, let's try and make this cool in some way or good, or and if I haven't got it, like, you find I find myself speaking to the drunk people almost like children, like, and I don't mean to be patronizing, but sometimes it's just being so ridiculous, like, I just sort of say, like, I've just watched you dancing all night and now you're here asking me to play your tune. You've obviously enjoyed yourself up until this point. Like, just come and go back. You don't have to listen to that. You can listen to it on your, on your iPhone on the way home or something like that. And they're like, okay. And I don't mean to be patronizing or anything, but obviously, if you're in the middle of trying to mix two tunes together and you've got someone like holding up a Spotify tune to your face, it's just like, you're throwing me off here. So I've tried. Go on.
Do you think being sober allows you not to play the requests, or would you have not played them anyway?
No, I wouldn't have played them anyway, to be fair. To be fair, when I used to DJ drunk, I'd almost join in with the stupid behaviour and just be a lot more boisterous and act like a bit of a prat probably whilst I was DJing, and I think it helps, or it did help, be more sociable, and you can interact with drunk people if you're drunk yourself a lot easier than if you're sober. But yeah, like I said, it just seems that everything this time round, this sobriety trip is just easier. Not easier, it's just I think I'm way more focused, and like I said, I've done it so many times now. I think this time round I'm just really committed to seeing it through, and not, I haven't even got like a right, I'm going to not drink for a year, or not for just today, I'm just going with the flow and hoping for the best. But I haven't got nothing inside me wants to go back to that life. I don't want to go back to having poor night's sleep and feeling paranoid and having anxiety. I've got too much on. I'm the king of taking on more than I can handle.
That's me as well.
Yeah, it's just a good way to keep sober, I guess. You know,
and that's part of sobriety, though, is doing things that fill you with passion and purpose. So not being hungover and half-assing life, you're actively doing all the things that you want to do.
Yeah. So I mean, when I did the 14 months sober, that was when I decided to start a record label, and I wouldn't have done that if I was drinking. And certainly, so that, you know, I did got it off the ground when I was sober, then started drinking again. And I'd noticed that if I was hungover, I'd find myself being like, just, I don't know, almost like looking at other labels and being envious in a way, and like, you know, because I wasn't putting the work in. I wasn't there on Instagram posting stuff because I was hungover, but then I'd look at things and go, oh, they've got more followers than I have, or oh, they've put out that tune. And you know, I'd often think that the music I was making or the things I was doing with the label weren't that good. And, you know, instantly there was this big negative kind of pull on something really positive that I started that no one else saw. It was just me. I was just in this own like world of doom and gloom, just doubting what I was doing. And as soon as I stopped drinking, I just became, you know, so much more upbeat and positive about it. And okay, let's go. Like, what can we do this year? Who can we sign? Let's go find someone. Let's go, you know, let's do a radio show. Let's do this. Let's like put out some more clothing. And it's just, yeah, I just find myself so much more passionate about things. Whereas obviously when you're drinking, you just, you know, especially at 42, if you have a heavy weekend, like that's your week gone. You know, you're going to be just miserable for a week, and there's no way around that.
So I stopped drinking at 31, and my hangovers lasted all week. I was suicidally depressed by them, with all the late nights doing coke and just staring at a white wall for about 10 hours, thinking this is no way to live.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say about the imposter syndrome that you had with the record label. Because I think I did as well. I used to drink when I felt like imposter syndrome was kicking in, thinking I wasn't as good as other people. And imposter syndrome's huge. So Instagram, TikTok, and anything else, there's too many to name these days. But they're all people sitting on phones looking at other people. And the problem is people then think, oh, I want to be like that person, or I want to be like this person, I want to be as successful. But it's all bullshit. I think once you cut alcohol out as that numbing agent, you have to come up with the solution yourself, and that is just to give it a fucking go. I mean, the fear of failure is what prevents people from ever doing anything. Like when I was stuck in a corporate job, the fear of failure kept me in that job. All I wanted to do was have a mortgage, get married, and potentially have a couple of kids. But then when I stopped drinking, all that shit goes. You come out of the matrix, and you start to understand that actually you can do whatever the fuck you want to do in life. You just have to be prepared to work for it. And that's the thing with your record label. You'll see with sobriety that it will go from strength to strength. You've got all that experience and knowledge, and it already sounds like it's done really well since you started it back. Was it back in COVID?
Yeah, well, so I started in 2019, and then we put out a range of clothing, just like merchandise at the time, just t-shirts with the label's name on it, and we sold out quick. So we got loads more done, and then we sold out again. And I've always been really fashion focused, and like, you know, I love hats, I have trainers, I love, you know, I like that streetwear, that kind of Supreme, Palace, all those kind of brands. So it's always been something I've wanted to do. So I just thought, you know, okay, I can't really start a clothing company and a record label, so I just try and put out merchandise, but not just be, this is a t-shirt with my label name on it. You know, I'd employ a graphic designer to come up with a range of different t-shirts, all relating to the label and the music and the vibe that we kind of put out. You know, I want to do hats, so you know, went and invested in getting hats made in China and then sent back. This is one of them. So it's just and from so it was in COVID. I literally had all these boxes of clothing like surrounding me, just ready to go out there. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like no one's going to buy any clothes. Everyone's lost their jobs. And just thinking like, oh my God, what have I done? And then the furlough thing happened and everyone was just sat on their laptops buying clothes. I was just like, so it kind of worked out really well. For that, and then we did another clothing drop, which again has done pretty well. We're pretty much sold out of everything now. So yeah, it's I'm starting to put the wheels in motion of, you know, getting together another range of clothing, because the problem is with digital music, like, you know, if you want to make enough to go and have a McDonald's, you need to like stream 10 million times or something. Like it's just a waste of time. So you see that, you know, if you're not going to do vinyl, which you could do, but then, you know, the kind of vinyl craze means that if you want to get vinyl pressed, it's going to take like 6 months. So I just stuck with digital and just realized, obviously, you know, the clothing was something I'm very passionate about, and I've sort of built a really nice kind of cult following of people who, you know, if we bring out something new, people will buy it. And that's where I wanted to be. Obviously, you know, you always want to be bigger and better, but there's, like I said, I work full time as well, do the label, produce music, DJ, and I've got a family. And I try and skateboard when my body allows me to, but that's not very often. And I've got a very needy chihuahua.
So you've definitely got your hands full. I mean, like there's loads of positive things that you're doing with your sobriety, and it just sounds like you've naturally come to that point that I think a lot of people do, where I've relapsed plenty of years, and just over time, you build experience. Like people say it's called rediscovery or something corny like that, but it's all a learning. I think one of my favourite phrases is you either win or you learn. And while things like sober days, if they get reset to 1, might give off the wrong message, I think they're more experience days gained than anything lost. And it's it's just great to see.
Yeah, I mean, so going on that, I think for me is one of the things as well is because I'm a dad and my son, he's 11 now. So obviously I know that I grew up around alcohol and seeing excessive drinking, and now he's at that age where he's seen me, like, you know, this New Year's Eve just gone, like, you know, we live like a 10-minute walk, 5-minute walk from our friend's house, and I probably fell in about 20 bushes on the way home, and unfortunately he saw that, and it just gets to the point where I'm just like, okay, cool, like I don't want history to repeat itself, like not while I've got the kind of power to not make that happen. You know, I'd much rather he grew up seeing me with my head screwed on, doing all these different things, following dreams, even at 42, do you know what I mean? Following things that I've really wanted to do, you know, still making music, still just trying to skate. And also, you know, I'm more available for him now, emotionally, physically. Like Saturday morning, he plays basketball, so Saturday morning we're up the basketball court shooting hoops. You know, before I just wouldn't have been able to do that because I'd just be feeling crap, and I'd be like, you know, the double-edged sword that's like iOS and PS4. I'd be like, yeah, go on, you go play Fortnite, mate. I'm just gonna have a couple of coffees. Whereas now I'm like, nah, screw that. Screen time's, nah, it's not happening. We're going to play basketball. We're going to get some fresh air and practice. So
the thing is, just even saying that, like the level of care from chucking someone with an iPad or PS4 or whatever to actually taking them outside, being out in nature and all that is going to raise a different child.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two polar opposites. One's very insular and the other one is going to build things for them in a positive way. And it is good that you've got that as accountability. I think some people would just continue to use having children as a potential trigger. But I think from a lot of people that I've spoken to with kids, it is very much, it's almost like having a new relationship with their kids as well, because it's different. You're more present, and the power of being present is what sobriety is all about, I think. So thanks very much for coming on. We're going to have to cut it short there, because we've almost done an hour.
Yeah, I'm on fire. I can
on my
talk for
30-minute
days.
podcast.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Luckily, I've upgraded Zoom, as I like to mention in every podcast. So we could have talked for about 3 hours. But it's great to speak to you, especially with all the DJing stance on it as well. Wish you all the best with that, doing it sober and for the record label. We'll keep in touch anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the Facebook community, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, I am. I actually posted the other day just about my experience going to a nightclub and being sober. So I kind of like writing stuff. So, I like to pop in and sort of, just write the little things that I've been doing and how I've dealt with them and things like that. So yeah, I'll pop up again for sure.
Nice. And just for anyone listening, there is a Facebook community, Sober on a Drunk Planet, Giving Up Alcohol community, or it might just be Sober on a Drunk Planet. Join the group, it's free. Loads of people in there all trying to stay sober and not get into trouble, basically.
Stay out of trouble.
Like that. Yeah. Right, thanks very much, Leo, and that's the end of the episode.
No worries, thanks for having me.